Welcome to Dear Brothers and Sisters, where you will hear the raw truth. My name is George. I am your brother, and I love you. Today we finish a three-part series, or we present to you the third of a three-part series on education. We'll review the last 2 weeks later on after we mention our 7 major issues. And before we do that, again, I remind you that most of the information on this show is based upon the book which I wrote entitled Dear Brothers and Sisters, Gender and Its Responsibility. This book is the only book that exists that discusses gender on the basis of a universal principle. Thank you. Also, we have flyers describing our program. This one here, The Raw Truth by George, discusses the major issues, and it tells when we are on and what channel, and they're free, and you might want to distribute them to your friends. We also have here a handout called Are You a Bull or Are You Hamburger Meat? And the other side says American Women and the Harem Master. They're considered to be 2 of the best articles I have written, or at least provocative. You're reminded that we do have audio tapes of our more popular programs and videotapes of every program. You can inquire about this information on our voicemail number, which is 874-7900, extension 1329. If you want to make a note of that, 874-7900, extension 1329. If you care to call now, if you're a regular viewer of this program, would care to call now, leave your name and address and phone number while I list the 7 major issues affecting us. We now have 1.5 million men in prison. 1.5 million. That's a 50% increase since my book was written 3 years ago. We've gone from 1 million to 1.5 million in 3 years, 4 at the most. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. We have 1 million of our youth in street gangs, which is a reasonable expectation if 1.5 million men are in prison. Of course, those 1.5 million men who are in prison, many of them are the fathers of the 1 million youth who are in street gangs and who are, in essence, establishing a masculine structure. Number 3, our women are suffering physically, mentally, and emotionally. They have an increasing incidence of cirrhosis of the liver, of lung cancer. 3 to 4 million of our single women have human papillomavirus or chlamydia. They are overworked, stressed out, fearful of the safety of their children and their own physical well-being. We have very high crime rate in all categories. This current drop that we see through most of the nation is but a temporary phenomenon. We threw an extra 500,000 into prison, plus tens of thousands into juvenile detention centers. When the children of the current bumper crop of unwed mothers reaches adolescence, there'll be a crime rate that this nation has never before seen. Number 5, our educational system is in a state of dysfunction. Our high schools are holding pens in which little more is learned than how to use condoms. And our colleges and universities give increasingly high grade point averages to students with lower and lower SAT scores. Our economy is stagnant at best because we have forgotten the source of new, and it is new that pushes the economy forward. And lastly, morality and ethics have disappeared from the media. Those are the 7 major issues affecting us today, or that we in this organization, this movement, consider to be the 7 major issues. Now, today we are going to discuss education. 2 weeks ago, we spoke primarily of the grade schools. And we indicated that the major problem in the grade schools was, number one, there are no standards. Everybody moves on to the next grade, and everybody graduates, regardless of performance. They can have all D's or all F's, depending, of course, on the school district. Secondly, discipline was a major problem in these schools, and it detracted from the teacher's ability to present her course material. And then some of the teachers, having been raised through this system, are ill-prepared to do their jobs. We mentioned that these problems are a function of the lack of the masculine influence in society. Standards are set by men. Men make standards. Men are out of the picture at home and in society, and there are no more standards. We live in a feminine, increasingly feminine, socialistic society today, in which there are no standards. The government makes the standards, but the government doesn't know your child as you know your child. Number 2, discipline is something that men normally take care of, and now these children being raised in homes without fathers are not disciplined. And the school system is not prepared to discipline them. That took care of the first week. The second week, last week, we went into the high schools, and we got a little theoretical and discussed the difference between information and knowledge. And we pointed out that knowledge comes from men. Men, not human beings, men, okay? Men create knowledge. Women deal in information that comes from the knowledge that men have created. And college degrees are pieces of paper indicating how much information you studied of the knowledge that men without degrees created. And just quickly, we indicated that Bill Gates, David Geffen, Kurt Kerkorian, those billionaires who are running a large segment of industry in America today, none of them are college graduates. We indicated that inventors like Thomas Edison and Gene Clapper, who has 70 working patents at IBM, never went to college. That Nikita Khrushchev, who became the leader of the second most powerful nation in the world, was taken out of grade school when he learned how to count to 40 because they were so poor that his father told him, you'll never own more than 40 of anything. We indicated that Moses, the Buddha, and Mohammed had no theological training and that they were responsible for 3 of the world's greatest religions. Where did all these people get their knowledge from? Whether it was knowledge of business and finance, engineering, inventiveness, government, or theology. Men get it from their contemplative nature. They get it from the source of all things. If you're religious, men get their knowledge from God. God is the source of all knowledge, right? And it flows through men, okay? And only through men, because men are contemplative in nature. However, this being a socialistic, feminine, even European mother goddess of materialism culture, the masculine influence is declining, and we are now information rather than knowledge-oriented, materialistically oriented, rather than spiritually oriented. And our answer to problems is materialistic now. Throw money at it, throw information at it. Now, if you remember 2 weeks ago when we spoke about the Civil War soldiers, the privates, who had gotten their educations either in a one-room schoolhouse or from their parents, writing beautiful letters, grammatically correct, without vulgarity, excuse me, there wasn't any money thrown at their education, hardly anything. Education was very, very cheap, inexpensive, not costly, and look at the results. Today, the cost of education is very, very high, and the results are very, very poor. That should lead one to the conclusion that throwing money and information at problems, which is the feminine gender approach, does not work, and that the solution to problems are conceptual in nature, which is the masculine gender approach. The solution to problems take up non-materialistic qualities like constancy, dependability, standards, truthfulness, reliability. These things are not information, nor are they money. Now, in order for this to happen, though, to have that influence in society, there have to be men to step forward and do what is necessary to be done. To be good fathers, to be good husbands, and to be involved in their community and use their masculine attributes. But how are these men of today being prepared? Well, number one, we've got 1.5 million of them in prison, which is a phenomenal amount of men. In fact, folks, I just have to tell you, 1.5 million men in prison. Now, we have 260 million people in this country, but half of them are women. So now we've got 130 million men to pick from, but maybe 20 million of them are children. And there aren't many men age 50, 60, 70 in prison. And there aren't any men under the age of 18 in prison, because they're not men then. When you get to how many men age 18 to 30 are in prison in relation to the total number of men that age, it's a phenomenal number. It could be 1 in 6. It's phenomenal. And this nation is accepting it. And I'm sorry that no, I'm not sorry I went off on this tangent. I hope I didn't interrupt your train of thought too much, but this has got to be a more pressing issue on the minds of the people of this nation, that our youth, an increasing percentage of our youth, are spending their lives rotting away in cages. All right, before that tirade, let's see, where was I? I was saying that those who are educated in the one-room schoolhouses, had good educations, wrote beautiful, grammatically correct letters. Today, we spend a lot of money on education, and the children can't write, they can't count, they can't add, they can't add up a check in a restaurant, they certainly don't know how to take 15% of that check, and on and on. However, many of those things we can call information, but the men of this nation are not being prepared, conditioned to bring in the new knowledge. One other review quickly that I want to make is that the age of inventiveness in this nation pretty much ended by 1950. Any invention that you can think of, the automobile, the airplane, rocketry, the atom bomb, the computer, the microchip, radar, so on, that's all before 1950. What you're seeing since 1950 are innovations, which is the feminine gender aspect of life. But there is not too much new coming on. The fact that we went from copper wires to fiber optics to this or that, it's still the telephone. The fact that computers have greater speed and what have you, the computer was before 1950. I don't know too many people that can name an invention since 1950. That should give us cause for pause and say, if we're running out of new, N-E-W, we're running out of new, what's going to be happening to this nation? But let's say for the moment we won't run out of new. And let's say even for the moment that I might not be too right that men are the only source of knowledge. There's another important factor required with knowledge before new comes about. And that's the ability to push it forward. You see, Columbus didn't just sit in a chair in Europe and say, I'm pretty sure the world is round. No, he had to go around and scrounge up support for that trip. Then he had to put up with crews that were mutinous. He had to maintain discipline. He had to have the courage and self-conviction to stay with the course that he will eventually get there. This is not just Columbus. This is any man who has accomplished anything new and out of the ordinary. Edison tried thousands of combinations before he hit it right with the electric light. Most inventors have failure upon failure upon failure before they succeed. Most men of social change brought about social change met failure after failure. Look at the years that Gandhi spent in prison. Martin Luther King was in prison. The labor leaders, the early labor leaders of this country were in prison. Look at how men were ridiculed. Look at Robert Fulton, Fulton's Folly. I mentioned that Marconi was considered insane. His friends brought him to a doctor. The idea that sound could be projected through the atmosphere. Most people who made change, brought knowledge into this world, had to couple that knowledge with the pioneering spirit, with force, with energy, with conviction, with constancy. Men used to be trained to have those qualities. That was part of a man's education in all parts of the world. In North America, in South America, in Africa, in Asia. That's what the rites of passage was all about. Now look at our university men today. They're put in the same classrooms with women. With increasing frequency, their fraternities are being taken away from them. Sororities, too, are disappearing, but they have women's clubs now, okay? Now, no fraternities, no sororities, but women's clubs. No men's clubs, but women's clubs. We have indicated a multitude of times on past programs, right, that gender is, the masculine gender is the assertive influence and the feminine gender is the receptive entity, and put together they create all that there is, or produce all that there is. Now we're putting the assertive influence in the same classroom with the receptive entity. We're bringing that assertive influence with things conceptually into the same classroom with those who think materially. Women's thoughts are on the screen and they think in size, shape, and color. I haven't had a woman deny this yet. Men do not think on screens with pictures. They think conceptually. Deborah Tannen in her book said the average woman speaks 7,000 words a day. The average man speaks 2,000 words a day. Well, if you don't have pictures to describe, you don't need as many words to do it. Now we have 2,000 word a day people in the same classroom with 7,000 word a day people. If we cut back on the number of words for the 7,000 word a day people, they're going to feel shortchanged. They're not going to get their pictures filled in. If we talk more than 2,000 words a day to the 2,000 word a day people, they're going to start getting bored, and they're not going to listen. And our classrooms are becoming an average of knowledge. First of all, not knowledge, an average of information. There is no knowledge being developed in our universities today. In fact, I will tell you, this nation probably would be a lot better off if the universities were closed down altogether. I know for certain that the men would be a lot better off. But in any event, this is what we have. We have co-ed education now, right? And we have mixed the genders, and we have mixed their attributes, and we have come out with an average, rather than cultivating each gender to bring out the best that it offers to the world. However, this is having a serious effect on what we're able to do anymore. Now, I'm going to give you a case in point. This year, and this is 1995 that this tape is being made, there are various cutbacks have been made in education in states and communities throughout the nation. One school system here in New York City, which I won't mention, had a candlelight ceremony, a demonstration about the cuts in the budget, because they felt they had a right to an education. And if the government was cutting back on the money, they may not be able to complete their educations. It was a failure. It accomplished nothing. Now I'm going to tell you why it accomplished nothing. And there are a few reasons. Number one, if the government cut back on its money, that did not mean there would not be some other kind of a way to get an education. This is what has caused men to build bridges, to find some other way to cross the water. This is what has caused men to build airplanes, to find some other way to get over the mountain. You find another way to get what you want. And if the government isn't putting the money up, there's an infinite number of other ways to get the money. That's number one. That's a major lesson that should be learned. Number two, when women want to make change, they always go outside of themselves to make change. A wife goes to her husband. A woman goes to her boyfriend. The feminists go to the government, because all women know that the power is outside of themselves. So whether they go individually or as a group to unite to go to the power. Even the women suffragettes did that. They went to the power. Right? Now, men should know that they are the power. They are the power. There is no greater power in this, on the face of this earth, than the power that flows through men. That is the power. So there's nothing outside to get. The power is in the men, you know? The guys with the testosterone, okay? But now, since they're in the same classrooms, in the same meeting halls, right, and the same average kind of thinking flopping around, now the men and the women walk around with their candles in the candlelight ceremony, right, demanding, get this, demanding from what they are collectively acknowledging is a power greater than themselves. Do you get this, fellows? I hope that this soaks in. When you demonstrate with the women, you are acknowledging there's a greater power out there than you. There isn't. The way these things are supposed to work is the women demonstrate and the men make change. You got it? Women demonstrate, men make change. You may have to get your head bashed in to make some of the changes. That's being a man. That's happened in the in the labor movement. That happened with Gandhi. That happened with Martin Luther King. That happened in almost any activity that men tried to make significant change. But one thing men did not do was demonstrate. Martin Luther King did not demonstrate. He said, we're going to sit wherever we want in those buses. The bus company said, no, you can't. And they said, we're not taking your bus. They didn't demonstrate. They didn't ride the buses. And they said, we're not riding your bus until we sit wherever we want. Men make change. Walter Luther said, if you want us to work for you, we want $1 an hour. You don't pay us $1 an hour, we don't work. That's not a demonstration. Men make change. But now we're in the school system that inhibits men from being developed to go out into this world and do and make the changes necessary to be made. And it's making the men, with the women, ask the next masculine authority for all that they have, namely the government. You have given up your manhood to the government when you demonstrate against the government. Men make change. Let the women demonstrate, and let them bandage your wounds when you go out there and you do the thing that men are supposed to do. But that's not happening in our educational system. The men are being crushed. They're being wimped out. And any man that speaks up and tries to be a man, he ends up in a gang or living in a cage with 1.5 million brothers. That's the disaster of our educational system today, brothers and sisters. I ask that you reflect on this. If you have any comments, you know how to reach me. Until then, it was a privilege to present this to you today. See you next week. Take care.